study the okay, the hydrosphere, lakes and rivers, as well as the cryosphere, snow and ice. So why come work with the Meteorological Service? Well, we are the largest employer of meteorologists in Canada. We typically have about 500 meteorologists employed all across the country in our different forecast programs and groups. All meteorologists, when they start out, they start in one of our operational forecast centers. And even within that, there's a lot of variety. So we have our operational forecast programs for the public program, aviation, ice, as well as military forecasting. And then once you've done a few years as an operational forecaster and built up those skills, there's other development opportunities that can arise later on in your career. So that could be within research and development, working on some of our models, in service delivery, doing outreach and communication, in training like myself, air quality, climatology, modeling, lots of different areas to explore throughout your career. Another benefit, I think, is the salary. So when you start out, you're hired into our operational training program, which lasts about 2.5 years in total. The first 8 months or so of that is spent in a classroom environment. And in that first section, you're typically earning about $70,000 a year, just under $70,000 a year. Throughout the training program, there's built-in timelines for promotion and yearly increments as well. Basically, what it amounts to is typically most meteorologists, by their 6th year of employment, are making at least $100,000 a year. There's good benefits as well. Obviously, those benefits associated with most government of Canada jobs. So it includes things like a dental plan, health plan, and probably one of the better ones is the pension. I know you're all in university, probably not thinking about retirement right now, but just be aware that the government of Canada, we still have a defined benefit um, pension, which is pretty rare nowadays in North America, but it's considered the gold standard. A note about job security. New meteorologists, like I said, they enter into our training program, which lasts about the first 2.5 years of your career. During the whole length of the training program, you're considered to be on probation. What that means is there's specific timelines where you have to be able to demonstrate certain skills and master certain competencies. From time to time, we do have to release some employees during our training program when it's just obvious that the job is not a good fit for the individual. That being said, the vast majority of our hires do make it through the entirety of the training program and go on to long careers in the Meteorological Service of Canada. So in terms of the different career paths, we'll go into a bit more detail about each of them, starting out with the operational stream, which is where all meteorologists basically start their careers. But even within the operational stream, there's 4 different forecast programs that you could find yourself after completing our initial classroom training. So those different 4 programs are in our storm prediction centers, or SPCs, with our aviation centers doing aviation forecasting, with our ICE services group, or with our aviation and defense weather services group. So we'll dial into each of these. So first off is our storm prediction center. You can see where they're located here across the country. There's about one in every second or so province. And the meteorologists at our storm prediction centers, they're forecasting high impact weather for the public, marine, and air quality forecast programs. If you ever receive an alert on your phone for a severe weather warning, it's one of our meteorologists at an SPC who has written that and issued it to you. They do some communication with the media as well, along with emergency services and the public. Their main duties, though, are forecasting things like probability of precipitation, daytime highs and lows, strong winds, wind direction, that kind of thing. If you have the WeatherCan app installed or ever go to the weather.gc.ca page, all the forecasts that you find there are written and created by our meteorologists in the SPC. And a note as well, our SPC in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, just outside Halifax, is also containing the Canadian Hurricane Center. So anytime there's like an extratropical cyclone coming up the coast and entering Canada's territory, the meteorologists at the Canadian Hurricane Center in Dartmouth, our SPC there, are taking on responsibility for that. Another stream that you might find yourself in operationally is with our aviation center called the CMAX. They split Canada's airspace in half. We have two offices. So the Montreal office handles the airspace from Ontario eastwards, and our Edmonton office handles our airspace from Manitoba westwards, as well as all of the Arctic. You'll note as well that for Montreal and Edmonton, they also have an SPC, a Storm Prediction Center, co-located there. So there's basically two prediction offices in Montreal and Edmonton, meaning that they're the largest sort of offices where we find meteorologists in the country. So the role of the CMAC, the aviation centers, is basically forecasting the weather for all of Canada's aviation industry. We have about 200 airports, believe it or not, across the country, a lot of them in the Arctic as well, where there's no other access. And it's important to be able to forecast the takeoff and landing conditions at each of those runways for pilots and dispatchers in the air navigation industry. So the role of these meteorologists is basically forecast those takeoff and landing conditions, as well as communicate in-air hazards and risks. So things like turbulence, icing, convection. More often than not, we do have volcanoes erupting in Alaska or Iceland, and the ash drifts into our airspace, which is not good for planes. So forecasting where the volcanic ash is located, and wind shear across runways, low ceilings, and visibilities. On the slide here, you can see a couple of examples of the products that are issued by our aviation meteorologists. So on the right is some graphical products that are issued in time every 6 hours to show weather en route hazards. And then we also issue text-based forecasts that are written in a code that dispatchers and pilots can parse to determine the takeoff and landing conditions at every airport in Canada. Okay, next up, another area you can find yourself early on in your career is with our aviation and defense weather services groups. So we have three offices for this. The largest by far is in Gagetown, New Brunswick, just outside Fredericton. And then two smaller offices where we have meteorologists as well at the Naval Yards in Halifax and Esquimalt on Vancouver Island. So while most meteorologists for the SPCs and CMACs that we discussed are focusing just on weather in Canada, our meteorologists who are sent to our aviation defense weather services groups are on contract to the Canadian Armed Forces. And so they could be forecasting for anywhere around the world where the Canadian Armed Forces currently require a forecast. So that makes it a little bit interesting. It's important to note as well that all our meteorologists were all employees of Environment and Climate Change Canada. It's just that we contract our services out to the Canadian Armed Forces as well. For this group as well, they're doing a mixture of all types of different forecasting programs. So aviation, obviously, for the Canadian Air Force, Marine for the Navy, and then public type forecasting as well is built into it. All meteorologists, when you're hired, you have to get reliability security clearance, which is the lowest level in the government of Canada. However, if you do end up getting posted to work in our aviation and defense weather services group, you end up having to get secret security clearance level as well, since you're working on a military base. Another area where we often have our operational meteorologists, and which is a bit unique to Canada since we're an Arctic nation, is with our Canadian Ice Service. We currently just have a single office for this located in Ottawa, and they are forecasting the thickness and movement of ice in our navigable waters. So for marine traffic to be able to be aware of where the ice might be located since it's a hazard for them. It's not just for the oceans, but also they're forecasting for some of the larger lakes in Canada where we have marine traffic as well, just communicating where the dangerous ice conditions are to clients and how that's expected to evolve over time. Most of this forecasting is done through the production of ice charts, which some of you may have seen before. They're kind of called egg charts that really just zero in on the type of ice found in different areas of our water. Okay. So like I said, all meteorologists start out in operational forecasting, so typically one of those four programs. Later on in their career, though, they can branch out into other areas. One of those is with our services groups. So our client service operations are staffed typically by what are called warning preparedness meteorologists, or WPMs, as well as program meteorologists. These groups are currently located all across the country in regional offices. Their main role is providing decision support services, communicating the impact of what the forecast is to major client groups, as well as national and provincial emergency management operations in the case of very severe weather, and with the media as well. Their main role, like I say, is communicating risk. They do have certain products that they produce that are easily able to be read by either the public or emergency managers and things like that. A note as well that the MSC, we're currently undergoing a period of transformation over the next few years. So this group may evolve, whether some of these roles are merged into more operational work, or whether it becomes more of a national group as opposed to regional group, still to be determined. But lots of change going on right now. Another area you might find yourself later on in your career is in research and development. So this might be an attractive option to anyone who's very much into programming or the science side of things, numerical weather prediction modeling, the new development of our AI weather models, things like that. We do have regional science groups located across the country currently, but far and away the vast majority of our R&D meteorologists are located in Dorval, Quebec, so just outside Montreal at our Canadian Meteorological Centre, which is where historically our supercomputer that was used to run the numerical weather prediction models was housed. Their work is basically developing the tools and improving our numerical weather model suite to help operational forecasters on the desk. And they do still do some communication. Obviously, they're collaborating with meteorologists all across the country to validate new updates to the model and new tools and things like that. Okay, so that was kind of the main career paths where you might find yourself as a meteorologist within the MSc. So this next part of the presentation is going to be more focused on how you yourselves can become a meteorologist with us. So we do have very specific education requirements that are in line with the World Meteorological Organization's requirements for meteorologists. So there's two parts to this. First off is a degree, which we were able to simplify this year to just read as graduation with a science degree, a bachelor, from a recognized post-secondary institution with acceptable specialization in meteorology, physics, and mathematics. What does acceptable specialization in meteorology, physics, and mathematics mean? It means you've basically taken these courses at university on your transcripts. So we require a minimum of 10 total courses in physics and math. That could be any combination thereof that adds up to 10, whether it's 5 courses in physics, 5 in math, 8 in math, 2 in physics, whatever adds up to 10 is fine. We also require at least one course focused on dynamic meteorology, one course focused on thermodynamic meteorology, one course focused on synoptic meteorology, as well as 3 other meteorology-related courses. So at York, historically, and I think it's still the case, there are 2 synoptic meteorology courses, so 1 and 2, and dynamic meteorology 1 and 2. So if you've taken both of those in each of those subjects, which I recommend you do, then we would count 1 towards the dynamic, 1 towards the synoptic, and the 2 other towards the 3 other meteorology-related course requirements. If you're not in your last year of studies currently, then I'd encourage you to look into our Meteorology Awards program, which we started up last year in line with Universities Canada. They're basically running a scholarship program that we are funding to provide about 20 scholarships a year across Canada. They range in value depending on the category between $5,000 and $10,000 to help encourage students to study atmospheric science. So there's 3 categories of awards. So if you are at York in a bachelor's program specializing in atmospheric science, you could apply for a $5,000 award for 1 year and reapply the following year for another $5,000. If you're entering the meteorology certificate program at York, you can apply for a one-time $10,000 award. And even if you're not in an atmospheric science major already or in the certificate of meteorology program, but you're interested in maybe exploring the idea of atmospheric science, and you're already at York in a Bachelor of Science program, then you can apply for a $5,000 award and you can reapply for a second year for another $5,000 if at that point you switch your major into an atmospheric science program or pursue the certificate program. There are certain conditions of employment that are unique to meteorologists that it's important to be aware of before you decide on this as your career. So one of the conditions is shift work. So the weather is 24/7. We want to make sure there's always meteorologists on the desk, be able to communicate the weather hazards. So we work in shifts. Typically, there are different shift lengths around the country, but far and away, the majority of shifts are 12 hours in length. So a day shift typically would be starting at 7 a.m. and ending at 7 p.m. And a night shift typically starting at 7 p.m. and ending at 7 a.m. Another condition is your presence is required at the working desk for the entire shift. Obviously, people can get up, use the bathroom, go make some lunch in the lunchroom, that kind of thing. We're just basically saying you can't be scheduling appointments outside the office when you're scheduled to be on a shift. You always have to have that situational awareness and be able to be seeing what the weather updates are. So we just ask that you not leave the building kind of thing. The one we get the most questions about is our mobility requirement. So mobility is a requirement of the job for about the first 5 years of your career. We have different operational offices all across the country. There's different retirement rates, people coming and going from different offices at different rates. We need to ensure that each office is appropriately staffed with enough meteorologists. And in order to do that, we move people around early on in their career. Each year, when you're falling under the mobility clause for about those first 5 years, you're asked to fill out a survey where you can indicate your preference for which offices you'd like to be located in. Then each year, a management committee gets together, reviews all the survey responses, looks at where the job openings are available, where we need people, and tries to slot people in according to their preferences. That being said, sometimes there are offices where there's not a lot of people who want to go there, and we desperately need people there. And at that point, we'll move people into them. What I tell people is typically expect in the first early part of your career, you're not going to be in the city that you most want to be in Canada. It might take you several years to get there. You will eventually get there, but it's going to take some time. I view it as a bit of a benefit. All the relocation expenses, once you're an employee, are fully covered by the Government of Canada. So even if you have children or a spouse, all the relocation costs for them are also covered. You get a house hunting trip beforehand to help look at the new area where you're going to, look into new apartments or houses. Real estate agent fees are covered. All the moving expenses are basically covered. As well, early on in your career, it can be nice to get exposure to different types of climate regimes. So obviously the weather in Edmonton is very different than the weather in Halifax. So being able to get exposure to all those different types of weather and building the expertise on how to forecast all those different types of weather can be a benefit to you long-term in your career. We typically launch our recruitment annually, each winter. It is open to those residing in Canada as well as Canadian citizens residing abroad. That being said, preference is given first for job offers to veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces, and then secondarily, equal measure to Canadian citizens and permanent residents. If you're in Canada on a student visa, let's say, I still encourage you to apply. It's just job offers are issued to qualified candidates who are in the Canadian citizens or permanent resident category first. Okay, a note about diversity, equity, and accommodation. So our federal government Department of Environment and Climate Change Canada wants to ensure that our recruitment measures are fair and equitable to members of the 4 equity deserving groups. So that's women, persons with disabilities, Aboriginal Indigenous peoples, as well as visible minorities. If you're planning on applying to our process this year and belong to any of those groups, I'd encourage you to self-declare on your application form when you submit it. A note about accommodation measures as well. These are available to candidates who request them. So if you receive an invitation to undergo an assessment as part of one of our recruitment processes, and you think you might require an accommodation, reach out to the HR advisor who's included on that invitation that you received to let them know what you need. Examples of common accommodation measures that are granted are things like ensuring that an assessment takes place in a wheelchair accessible environment. Okay, so in terms of the application process, like I say, we've already received approval to launch our next hiring process from all the chains of approval that are now exist under the current budgetary limitations. So we've received approval for that, which is good news. We hope to be able to launch it just before Christmas this year, depending on the availability of our HR advisor. If it's delayed, it would be delayed maximum into January. We typically have it open to applicants for about 3 weeks, a 3-week period in time, and it's found on our Government of Canada jobs website. Second step, after I receive all the applications, part of the application process is you have to send in your sort of transcripts, your university transcripts, if you've already graduated university, any diplomas you might already have. I'll review those, make sure people are on track to meet the education requirements. So obviously any courses that you're registered for next semester will show up as well on that, even though you haven't received a full grade for it yet. But I'll check to make sure you've either completed the courses or are on track to meet all our course requirements, at which point you'll be screened in and you'd receive an invitation to undergo some assessments. So the first assessment is an online oral exam. that assesses your knowledge of synoptic, dynamic, thermodynamic meteorology from those courses you're completing at York. If you're successful in the exam, you then get invited to undergo an interview, which will take place live on Teams with myself and one of my colleagues. Candidates who make it into our qualified pool after those assessments, we then send up to management team in the MSc. They review it, and then we seek approval to issue letters of offer. Hopefully, the letters of offer will go out earlier this summer. And then it would be to begin on our MOIP course, our training course, which typically begins in early September, either the first or second week of September, in our classroom environments in Montreal and Edmonton. So I'll go through a bit more details on each of these tasks. I know it's a lot. So for that initial application, like I say, we're hoping to get it online in mid-December this year, if not January. It will be on the Government of Canada jobs website. So I've got a QR code that links directly to that over here. You can create an account on that website at any point in time. I'd encourage you to do it right after this call while it's still fresh in your mind. Even if you're not in your last year of studies, sometimes it could be helpful to set that up in advance. Once you've got an account, you can set up email alerts for the next time our meteorology position poster gets posted online. That way you can ensure you won't miss it. You just have to select MT, which is the classification code for meteorologists in the Government of Canada, and set it up to just alert you when the next poster comes out for that classification. It is a very long poster, unfortunately. We do try to simplify it each year, but each year there's new requirements from HR and management to add to it. I'd encourage you not to leave it the very last day of the application window to start your application, just because it is quite long and involved. My recommendation is usually over a week, maybe set aside 30 to 45 minutes a day to just tack away at it, because it is a lot sometimes. Okay, so after you've submitted your application and I've screened all your transcripts and make sure you meet the education requirements or on track to meet the education requirements by the spring, then you'd receive an invitation to undergo one of our assessments. So the first one is that knowledge exam, which takes the form of an online oral exam. Like I say, it's synoptic, dynamic, thermodynamic meteorology. So those courses that you've taken at York, it's important to review those notes ahead of time. I highly, highly encourage applicants to study before the exam. If anyone's going to fail a portion of the assessments, it's likely going to be the exam part. I found when I was a student, we got in a group together at university to sort of study beforehand. That could be beneficial to you as well. If you want a supplement to your own course notes, a textbook I often recommend is Meteorology Today by Ahrens. Could be a good source to review as well. If you're successful on the exam, then candidates are invited to a second assessment, which is an online live interview with myself and one of my colleagues to assess behavioral competencies. So the competencies we're assessing there are things like working with others, since when you're a meteorologist, you're working on a team, 12-hour shifts, need to be able to get along with others. Your communication, obviously, how to communicate the science of the forecast, adaptability, initiative, thinking, client focus, demonstrating integrity and respect. These are all core competencies across the Government of Canada that are also very applicable to meteorologists as well. Okay, so those who receive a letter of offer over the summer are to start on our meteorologist occupational development program beginning in the fall. So the full development program takes about 2.5 years to complete in total. The first part that you enter into is what we call our in-classroom environment called the MOIP course. It takes place in our classrooms in Edmonton and Montreal, and it's at the MT1 level. This course lasts about 7 to 8 months typically in general. And you're basically taking the knowledge, the theoretical knowledge you learned in university and learning how to apply it into creating a forecast. Once you've completed the MOIP course, you're posted to one of our forecast offices somewhere in Canada, where you start the second phase of the development program called on-the-job training. So you're still at the MT1 level here. This period's a bit short. It lasts only about 2 months generally. You're basically paired up with a more senior meteorologist working a specific desk in a forecast office. And alongside that more senior meteorologist, you're gradually ramping up to being able to produce the entire workload of that forecast desk. Those who are successful at that then get a promotion and move on to the next phase, the development period. So they get up to the MT2 level, which comes up with a little bit of a salary bump as well. This period lasts about 18 months in total. The reason for that is we want to make sure that you're able to successfully do all the forecasting across all the seasons of weather in your forecast office. So you're still working on a forecast team here with more senior meteorologists, but you yourself are responsible for completing the entire workload of your forecast desk. The other meteorologists you're working alongside are still there to help you out, and they're filling out performance grids and evaluations of your work throughout the period. Those who are successful through that then get promoted to what we call the working level of a meteorologist, the operational meteorologist level called the MT3 level. At this point, you've completed the development program, and we provide you with a certificate that you are fully assessed as a qualified meteorologist. Our program is recognized by the World Meteorological Organization, so you can take that certificate with you all around the globe if later on you decide to leave Canada, want to explore a little bit. We do have former meteorologists now employed or who worked end up with the New Zealand Met Service and the Australian Met Service, things like that. It is recognized around the world. Okay, so zeroing in on that first part of the training program, so that's where new employees begin. It's the MOIT course. It is the classroom course. It's a paid 7 to 8 month training program at that MT1 level. Like I said, you're taking that theoretical knowledge you learn in university and learning how to apply it. The way they do this is throughout the course, it's a mix of theoretical training and then immediately taking that theoretical training and applying it to producing a forecast. So a lot of analysis skills, diagnosis skills, and then prognosis skills you're building towards. About midway through the course, you're asked to fill out your first mobility survey, where you're going to be able to list all the offices that you'd like to be posted to in Canada and provide some justification on why you want to be there. Like I say, management committee then gets together, reviews all the completed surveys from those on the MOIB course, as well as other meteorologists still under the mobility clause, looks at where the openings are around Canada and tries to slot people in. You'll be in that mobility pool for typically about the first 5 years of your career. So even if you end up in an office off the bat that's not one of your preferred offices, you have the chance year after year to restate that you'd like a move and eventually be moved somewhere else. I've got some images here of the last few years of courses. The top two are the last 2 years of the courses in Edmonton, and the bottom one is last year's course in Montreal to give you an idea on the typical sizes of courses that we have. Okay, something else to be aware of this year is that once again, we'll be identifying candidates for a special development stream in research and development. So basically all it means those candidates will be prioritized for eventual position in R&D once they've completed our development program, gone into the MT3 level. Candidates who are selected for this stream will receive all the same training as all the other meteorologists hired that year, but they'll also have the extra opportunity to be mentored by a senior R&D meteorologist once they're posted in a forecast office at that MT2 developmental phase. This option might be ideal for candidates who have a master's or a PhD or just really interested in numerical weather prediction modeling or programming, scientific projects, that kind of thing. If you're really interested in a career in R&D, make sure you just state that in your cover letter when you apply. This information maybe not so useful for those of you currently in university, but if you happen to know anyone who's currently employed, let's say in the private sector as a meteorologist in Canada or with a provincial entity, we do currently have a poster available at inventory to hire experienced meteorologists directly at the MT2 or MT3 level, so bypassing part or all of our initial training program. It's available to anyone who has at least 2 years of recent full-time operational weather forecasting experience as a meteorologist. They basically get assessed to demonstrate that they have part or all of that initial training that we offer in-house. So if you know anyone, feel free to send them that QR code link or just the URL directly. So that was all I had for the presentation. You'll see there's a QR code link on this page as well that will take you to our Become a Meteorologist website, which has a lot of the same information I just shared. I encourage you to check that out as a resource. I've also put up some email addresses here. So obviously we'll have a Q&A right away at the end of this, but if there's any questions that you either are a bit sensitive about or don't want to ask in an open forum, feel free to email me directly. So my work email is there, mariette.kulin@ec.gc.ca, or you could send it to our generic recruitment email inbox, which is the recmt1 ec.gc.ca email address that you see there. But for now, I'll just open it up to basically the Q&A. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone. And yeah, if you have a question, feel free to ask it out loud.
I have a question about the option to possibly defer an acceptance if someone decides to pursue graduate studies or something like that. Is that possible?
Yeah, we typically will go back to candidates within the last 5 years who might have turned down a letter of offer. It's not a requirement to do that. It's just something management has opted to do for the last little while. Um, so yeah, if you've qualified and turned down a letter of offer, historically, what we do is once we've created the new qualified pool, management has the option to say, let's look back at the last 5 years and see if there was anyone else who qualified and see if they want to be contacted again for a job. Uh, if you want to guarantee that you'd still be there, since that's not really a requirement, it's just a practice that we've done in the past. I'd encourage people to reapply again and just state that they don't want to be reassessed. But at least that way we have your application on file officially, formally as well.
Okay, so for someone who's planning to do graduate studies starting next year, would you recommend to apply now or when I finish?
I wouldn't recommend one or the other. It's entirely a personal decision to make. Um, if you want to be assessed this year, I would assume that you'd be accepting a position this year, and it would just be sort of an off case that you would have to turn down letter of offer if you received another position or decided to pursue something else.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. So the two possible training locations are Edmonton and Montreal. Is there like a substantial difference between the two, i.e., is like one French, one English, or what's the big difference there?
Yeah, historically, the classroom in Montreal is offered in French, and the classroom in Edmonton is offered in English. Sometimes when we have a larger hiring pool, we'll offer a second course in English in Montreal as well, but it really depends year to year on the hiring numbers.
Great, thanks.
No worries.
Hi, Mariette. It's Peter Taylor. I just wanted to thank you for a really nice presentation. I'm going to drop out and let these students ask you questions, but it was a really good presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi. Aside from MOWIP, does Environment Canada offer any other internships available to students still in school?
Yes, good question. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested in like a summer type position with Environment Canada to apply to the Federal Student Work Experience Program, or the acronym FSWEP. You could just Google FSWEP and it will be the first thing that comes up. Basically, if you want any job across the government of Canada as a student, that is the main way to get one. When you sign up, it's a really easy application process. You can state that your background, if you're studying atmospheric science, there's like atmospheric science is one of the options you can choose. And then every year, each forecast office across Canada will typically look to hire one or two summer students. So for you guys at York, the Toronto SPC would typically be the ones hiring the summer students out of the FSWEP program. Basically, the role is one where you're answering the severe weather phone line in the office to get reports of hail, tornadoes, things like that from members of the public. Oftentimes, you're doing small project work as well, like filling out spreadsheets, doing some climatology analysis, things like that. But it's a good way to get your foot in the door. You're in the operational office working alongside the forecasters, so it's really great exposure to see what the job is actually like for the future. That would be
Awesome.
my main recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, it's pretty quiet, so I might ask another question at the risk of, dominating the conversation too much. But yeah, so ECCC is like a really big organization, right? MSC is not the only entity inside it. So to be like, so I'm in a situation where I've got like graduate degrees, but not in atmospheric science, in math, and I'm building up the background with a certificate program here. So I know that, of course, there's a hard course requirement for MSc, like you talked about. But I know also that, say, in Victoria, the CCCMA doesn't necessarily, have those for their like climate modeling stuff. They don't have course requirements, but they look for people who've been through grad school. Now, other than MSc and CCCMA, are there other entities within Environment Canada, where somebody with my kind of weird fused background might be able to start applying for jobs as well?
Yeah, meteorology is a bit unique in Environment Canada in that we have this development program in-house. So, unlike most other positions, we do this annual sort of cohort hiring where we hire a bunch of people at once. Most of the other positions across Environment Canada, it's more ad hoc, the hiring. So it's when a manager has a specific position available, they might decide to launch an advertised process for that position. Oftentimes, those positions are as physical scientists, so it would be the PC classification that you could look for on the Government of Canada Jobs website, or the research positions. So the RES positions would be ones typically for people with like a master's, PhD type stuff for work more in the climatology side or oceanography side of things. There's a lot of budgetary pressures, obviously, right now across the Government of Canada. We were very lucky to be able to get even just the approval to launch our recruitment process this year, and we still don't know sort of the lay of the land where things will fall now that the budget has passed. Environment Canada is expected to be making 15% cuts overall within the next 3 years. Meteorology, we are an essential service. We do a lot of contracting out to the Canadian Armed Forces, which just saw a massive budgetary increase. So I think part of that is the reason why we've got an approval, at least to launch our process. Right now, when you look at the Government of Canada jobs website, though, it's the job offers are pretty few and far between, would be all I would say.
Yeah, that's pretty coincident with my experience. So, okay, I'm glad to know it's not just me not being able to find the right things. So, thank you for that. Yeah.
I think there's a question in the chat.
Did not even look at the chat. All right. Completed the full interview process in 2015. At the time, I turned down a conditional letter of offer. Last year, I reapplied and was unsuccessful in the oral exam. I would like to apply again this year. Is it possible that a record is still safe for 10 years? Historically, we've only kept them for 5 years. Unfortunately, that's been the rule. I think so much changes in one's life after about 5 years that we always insist on reassessing people beyond that period of time. But there's nothing to say you couldn't reapply again this year, and I encourage you to do so. I hope that answers the question.
What are the job prospects looking like for operational meteorologists within the next 1 or 2 years? It's kind of like my graduation window next year, so I'm just curious.
I forecast the weather is what I tell people. I can't forecast what happens in Parliament or budgets or upper management decisions.
Fair enough.
We are undergoing transformation right now in the meteorological service, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation. So a lot of changes are afoot right now. I hesitate to predict even what things will look like a year from now. The only things I keep in mind when I talk to students is that it is still an essential service. Obviously, we've been short-staffed the last number of years. We have those major contracts with the Canadian Armed Forces, which is really ramping up in terms of their own budgets. Part of the major, when you look at the last sort of cabinet letters that were issued by the Prime Minister to cabinet, one of the main issues that was indicated there was maintaining Canada's sovereignty, which the Meteorological Service of Canada plays a major part of in terms of exercising our sovereignty in the Arctic by providing those forecasts, and the Meteorological Service is the only one doing that in Canada right now. So, I mean, I can show you the signs, but I hesitate to predict how anything's going to fall out in the next few years. Unfortunately, I can't give a better answer than that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Uh, can everyone hear me? Is
Yes.
the okay, awesome. So I was the one who asked that question about 10 years ago. Now I did apply last year, and um, so if I'm going to apply again this year, I'm guessing that the cover letter, resume, obviously the diploma, that will probably count again to be invited for an oral exam. Is that because nothing has changed educationally for me?
It has changed in terms of like making it more specific. We've just opened it up slightly with the degree requirement.
Okay, no, that's good. And so basically, self-study through synoptic notes should be okay for the oral exam again?
Yeah, so I recommend dynamics, synoptic, and thermodynamic. Review all those three.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. When does scholarship application open for students doing a Bachelor of Science Arts? Yes, good question. We typically anticipate that the window will open probably by late December, if not early January again. It's kind of Universities Canada is the group that has this contract through Environment Canada to oversee these. And last I heard from them, they were shooting for late December, if not early January. So same timeline as when we anticipate our next recruitment poster to go online. So it would be people would be applying in that period. It's going to be available, I typically think, for about 3 months. So once you've applied for that award, it would be for studies beginning in fall of 2026. You're welcome.
So I got another question. So how is the internal recruitment for instructors in the training program done?
So we typically launch, so MT3 level is the working level of a meteorologist. Beyond that, there's higher levels that you can apply to for promotions. So it's not automatic promotion. You basically have to apply on a competition when one is available. So our training division will launch a competition for new instructors when we have positions available. Typically, the assistant instructor is at the MT5 level, which is equivalent to like a shift supervisor in operations. And our head instructor in each location is at the MT6 level, the program supervisor level. So if there's an MT5 competition or an MT6 competition, typically require people to be already at the MT3 level with a certain number of years of operational experience. Those are for the full-time positions as instructors. That being said, the course is 8 months long. It's not just those full-time instructors who are teaching. We bring people in from operations centers in Edmonton and Montreal to guest teach and also to help supervise when we're in like simulator environment in the training course. So basically that's just a call of interest that goes out for people interested in coming back into the classroom to help teach. Typically, though, it's mostly people who are already in Edmonton or Montreal who we get to come in to do that since the travel budgets are pretty low right now to move people over.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about the location for the on-the-job training. Is it the same as in the developmental stage, or is it somewhere different?
Uh, Typically, we try to post people to a single location after the course, and then after they've made it up to the MT3 level, at that point, we'll move them again. It's just because once you're at that initial on-the-job training and developmental period, to move someone during that time can disrupt the training. There are specific performance criteria you have to meet by specific deadlines. So if we're moving someone around midway through that period, it doesn't really set them up for success in being able to meet those performance targets, right? It's best to keep someone in a single location for that entire period, just to make sure that they can demonstrate appropriately and in time all the requirements.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have yet another question. So regarding the R&D stream, so for the first, so the training's the same, everything's the same until you get up to MTO3, right? So in R&D, are you still liable for or subject to relocation within 5 years, or is it okay? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you're still basically the first 5 years as an MT, whether you're in research development, services, operations, you still fall under that mobility clause. At the end of the 5 years, or if you earn a promotion before then to the MT level, then once it ends, basically you receive a certificate saying you're out of the mobility clause. You can still request a move yourself
Yep.
beyond that point. It's just you're not obligated to fill out the survey each year. And we wouldn't force you on a move, really.
Okay, okay, yeah. Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many people who end up doing R&D get relocated in that time?
Um, Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you that there's not R&D is a bit of a specialization. So I'd say in the past like 5 years, we might have had, I don't even know. I hesitate to guess how many have gone into an R&D position. It might be less than 10 probably.
Okay.
So, and then to have a move beyond that, I couldn't even tell you, maybe one
I
or
see.
two.
All good. Thanks.
I noticed on last year's posting there was a range of pay for the MT1 level. So how is it decided where the applicant will fall in that range?
Yeah. Management makes a decision each year based on where within the range to start salaries at. They made a decision last year, I believe, for the first time to offer slightly higher salaries to those who are coming in with a master's degree, since that meets one of the asset criteria. It wasn't a huge amount more, but it was just like an extra incentive, I guess. Additionally, last year, if you are already an employee elsewhere within Environment Canada, you have salary protection built in. So if you are making a higher salary before joining the white course, then you'd have that salary typically protected as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? No, not looking like it.